So, welcome, Dr. Scott Goldman. Thank you for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. It's good to hear you.
No, it's brilliant. And, what was quite nice when having a conversation with Adam prior to this and what you've created with the AIQ stuff. And then, having a good look at your CV and listening to your work. I think the listeners are really going to enjoy the conversation and a lot of the things that you've got to say today. So, thank you very much for joining us. So, for our listeners, this is Dr. Scott Goldman, high performance psychologist who spent the last 25 years working with elite athletes, coaches, and organizations across the NBA, NFL, MLB, and the NCAA. He currently serves as the head of psychology for the Golden State Warriors and has worked with world champions, MVPs, Olympic gold medalists, and top collegiate programs. Dr. Goldman specializes in helping teams understand performance, decision making, leadership, and talent at the highest level. He's also advised the NCAA on the athlete mental wellness and high performance best practices, while helping build the AIQ into one of the most leading cognitive assessment platforms in sport. So I think absolutely that you are. When I was looking at the credentials and I was looking what we set out for the creating, unlocking, or unlocking human potential as a podcast, you tick so many boxes. So it's great to finally get you on this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, when I hear you give that list, all it makes me think is, man, I'm old.
Well,
There's a lot of tread on those tires. There's a lot of wear and tear there. But anyways, there's not much left. There's not much tread left, I guess is what I meant to say. But yeah,
there's still a smile though, which I think is always good, and there's still the
I'll take it.
energy, which is
Yeah.
which is good. So one of the things that runs through um, all of the listeners, all of the kind of guests that we've had on is curiosity. And so something I'd like to start with is what's something you're curious about right now?
Well, before I answer that, and I hope this is okay.
Mm,
I love the concept of curiosity. And I think it's something that kind of separates us from other species on this planet. Like, we're the only species that competes recreationally. Now I know we're talking about curiosity, but I think competition and curiosity kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
okay.
So, other species on this planet, they compete for territory or they compete for mates. We actually are the only species that kind of do it recreationally, and we're also the only species to have gone to the moon. So I think there's something kind of neat about us being curious explorers. So I like the concept that we're kind of going down this rabbit hole of curiosity. All right, so what am I curious about right now? Um, I think I'm curious about two things in the spaces that I'm sitting in. One is the infusion of technology. It seems to be accelerating exponentially, especially with AI. So I'm watching and I'm listening and I'm observing to how pro teams are managing the AI arms race. I think the other thing that I'm kind of curious about is always human interaction. So it's interesting because one is incredibly new, AI and technology. The other one's incredibly old. Like humans
Mm.
have been interacting for, thousands and thousands of years, and we're still trying to figure that one out. So those are the two things that I'm curious about right now.
Oh, nice. And how do you think they two link? Because obviously AI is, so just wondering where you see the kind of crossover.
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of in draft brain, and I don't
Okay.
know when this is going to be aired, but the NBA draft is in about a week, 2 weeks, and I'm doing a lot of prep work for the teams that I work with on that. So I think what's kind of fascinating, right, is um, if you think of a draft room and the healthy debate and discussion about which players we should select, it's not that different than you and your buddies having a pint at the pub talking about which player you think is best.
Mm.
And I always felt like the invention of Google probably decreased the number of barroom fights.
Okay.
Because if you're talking about like who's the greatest fighter of all time or who's the greatest, footballer of all time, you would have this healthy debate that was very much that human interaction we were talking about. And now it's like, well, let's just see who's the best rebounder of all time in basketball. I don't know. Let's ask Google. So I think what's interesting is AI is getting to a point where you can have a conversation with it. Um, I did this the other day just as an intellectual exercise. I was on a road trip for about 4 hours, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. There wasn't a whole lot of people I could call. So I pulled open the AI app and I had a conversation with it just to see where the conversation would go.
Okay.
So I think where the two intersect is like, if we're going to settle a barroom debate about which player we should draft, are we asking each other or are we asking AI for that answer? And which answer do we value more?
And do we have an answer to that, do we think?
So, as one of the things I try to do with my own curiosities is I try to seek information so that I'm not just kind of like waxing poetic or pulling things out of my backside.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I came across was an article that said something that resonated with me where it said AI, the benefits of AI is it's unbiased, it's impartial.
Mm.
However, it's only as good as really the way you guide it. So you have to ask it really important questions right now. Now, that will likely improve, but that is one of its limits. The other limit is being able to tell anecdotal stories. So going back to like we're in the draft, and let's say we're talking about Andy's on our draft board. Andy's likely a top 10 pick. And then I know, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the European leagues, they don't quite go through a draft process because they have more like the development academies and stuff. But so let's just say it's maybe like the transfer portal, right? Or yeah, isn't that what you all call it? Like, right, the transfer
The
window.
window, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah,
transfer window. Sorry, college in American college, we call it transfer portal. So
yeah.
the transfer window's open. And now we're debating, should we, I think we've got a shot at Andy. Should we grab Andy or not? So if you ask AI, again, and you ask AI like kind of the right questions based on our style of offense and everything that we're doing, is Andy a good match for who we are? However, where the scout or the talent evaluator, the human, can go, Andy reminds me an awful lot of Steve when we were with Steve 5 years ago. And you remember how it played out with Steve and what happened with Steve? Because here are some things that like AI just wouldn't know because these things aren't public domain for it to pull from.
Yeah.
My gut tells me that the end game will probably be more of a yes and kind of thing. One doesn't replace the other. It's really about some form of harmony.
Okay. Mm. No, and I can see that, and I can see how that's going to play out, isn't it? One offers you a different insight, and again, so I think it's interesting, isn't it? And especially the world you're in, especially the world I know what you're creating with the tool that you've got. It's a really interesting concept, isn't it? And really helpful tool.
Well, one of the things that we did with the AIQ is we did create we call it AIQ Plus, and it's an AI model. It's internal. It doesn't have open access, so we hold the fidelity of the information that it pulls from. It does not go across the internet to pull it because compared to a lot of other sources where that might be of value, when it comes to sports, there is a significant difference, I think, between people who are outside the building and then people who are inside the building as far as what pieces of information they're digesting.
Mm.
So we keep it in a closed loop circle so it doesn't have outside access to the internet at large. We fed it over 297 documents of intelligence and intelligence theory, especially in the world of sports.
Mm.
And then we also fed it playbooks from
Mm.
professional leagues. And then we also gave it all of the things that we've ever constructed for teams. So, like our development books, our scouting reports, our analysis and understanding of how players operate and function. with the AIQ Plus, one of the things that we like to highlight is the AIQ Plus was intended not to teach teams or players about how to understand the AIQ, but rather how to have teams, coaches, and players understand the player.
Mm. For those people that are listening or unfamiliar with the platform you've created, can you just give an over summary of what the AIQ is?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when talking about the AIQ, it's almost like you almost have to start with what the AIQ isn't, right?
Okay.
So I think a comprehensive athletic profile consists of four domains, four buckets, if you will. So the first one is physical, big, strong, and fast. Second is experience and knowledge. So you know what kind of player you're getting when they come from certain schools. Um, you know, and forgive my English Premier League ignorance, but like, it seems like whenever going back to the transfer window, it seems like if you grab a player from Brighton Hove Albion, there's a good chance that he's a superstar and yet might not be as good in your place as he was there, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So you've got experience. Third bucket is character and personality. Does this person make the locker room better in some way, shape, or form, or does he poison the well? And then the last piece of a comprehensive athletic profile is intelligence. And I think intelligence is something that people often interchange with knowledge,
Mm.
and it's not. So, um, and someone told me this once. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting way to describe it. Intelligence is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Knowledge is knowing that you don't put tomato in fruit salad.
I love that
So,
analogy. Yeah.
so I just think when you talk about intelligence, the way I like to think of it is it's kind of like it's the raw elements of your cognitive ability in regard to acquiring, processing, and applying information.
Okay.
So if knowledge is having the answer, intelligence is how you go about getting to that answer.
Yeah.
And in sports, like if you're a center midi and you're scanning and looking for information, the ability to scan and store information is a form of intelligence. Once you can scan well, then it becomes, well, what do we do with that information? That's where knowledge starts to kick in. So, what the AIQ does is it focuses on the intelligence aspect of those four buckets. And I think what it helps is when you see two players that are both big, strong, and fast, and one seems to go to the right place and the other one doesn't, it becomes an interesting mystery of, well, why
Mm.
is that? And I think people who are well informed have a tendency to make really smart decisions. And we already know, you mentioned your background's in physio, so we already know pretty good how to measure things like strength and mobility, as
Mm.
well as limitations, right? We're pretty good at watching film and understanding capability of their experience. It's really hard to get information on a person's character, but again, you can ask their previous coaches or you can kind of interview them directly and you can get a window into what their values are and what they believe. But this aspect of intelligence prior to the AIQ, there just wasn't a way to really capture it in the
Mm.
sports world. So my partner, Jim Bowman, who's an awesome human being, highly intelligent, he and I came up with this idea where we said, I think we can help kind of illuminate this final piece of the puzzle.
Nice.
Thanks.
Nice. No, I'm having had a bit of access through Adam and had a look at it, then it's a very impressive tool. And I would certainly, what I will do is drop the link for the listeners in the show notes so that anyone can then really look into it further.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
So, so the concept of this podcast, and for Newtown listeners, it's in three categories. It's looking at how do we unlock potential in ourselves and become the best versions of ourselves, and how that can happen. If you're in a leadership role or a management role or a coaching role? How do we get the best out of others? And then what we're going to do is we always believe that if someone's given us kind of 50 minutes at a time, that what we can try and do is help them wrap it up and put some advice in the end. So I guess when we're looking at unlocking our own potential and getting the best out of ourselves, where does that land with you, in your experience of working with individuals?
Um, so funny. It lands all over the place,
Okay.
but I think this is where I like to start. Sometimes I get the impression in the world of psychology, with the billions of dollars of books on shelves or the millions of podcasts that are out there, I think we're on a quest, right? I think we're on a quest to try to be the best versions of ourselves. And I think sometimes we're searching for a simple or easy answer. And I firmly believe human beings are wonderfully complicated. And I believe human interaction is a multiplier of that complication. So, the first place where this subject matter kind of sits with me is I'm not so sure a lot of the people who claim to be experts on this stuff really know what they're talking about.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure I probably fall in line in that group.
Okay.
So, what I'm about to say is based off of my studies, what I believe of the science that resonates with me, because I think there's this old adage of like for every PhD, there's an equal and opposite PhD. So, like, you can always see someone argue, like, oh man, if it, like pain is just weakness leaving the body. Like, you have that kind of like aggressive mind kind of pursuit. And then you have the, oh, be more zen and go with the flow of the river kind of thing, and the universe avails itself. And I find this kind of juxtaposition and debate always exists.
Yeah.
So what I'm about to say is really just kind of my own, I don't know, just it makes sense to me, but I can't say that it's truth or any more truthful than anything else that's out there.
Hmm.
Though I do feel like I have a healthy skepticism sometimes about this stuff. Because if we can understand human potential, if we can unlock human potential, I think we would have by now, you know? And that's
Mm.
what's beautiful about human beings is our complexity. Whether you're watching the stock market or trying to prevent murders or robberies, or again trying to engage in sport and letting this wonderful competition expand. So where I land on this is I think when we talk about human beings in the world of performance and sport, I think a lot of times what we're really talking about is their production.
Okay.
Oh, this guy's amazing. He's had 5 goals and 3 assists in the last 7 matches, kind of stuff. Which, I mean, that's a really outstanding run.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we make the assumption like, oh, so again, let's say Andy's had 5 goals and 3 assists in the last 7 matches, and for whatever reason he's available to us in the transfer window. It's like, let's go get Andy. And the reality is like we think by grabbing Andy, we're grabbing that production. When I think what we're really grabbing is just Andy. I
Mm.
think that production, that mastery quest that you're talking about, best version of yourself, I think it's really a formula of the person times the environment.
Okay.
And I think the environment is kind of nebulously defined purposefully for me,
Mm.
because I think the environment can be things like the weather, it can be things like the coaching staff, it could be the nutritionist, it could be the physio or the strength coach who has a soft ear. Um, the environment is wonderfully complicated. So I think human beings really shine when there's this really awesome fit between themselves and the environment. And some of that stuff in the environment we can control, and some of
Mm.
it we can't. We just get kind of lucky with.
Mm. It's a really interesting lens to look through, isn't it?
or I'm as full of BS as much as anyone else in this
Well,
space.
I think the thing with a lot of these conversations is, ultimately I always look through this when I'm having these conversations is we never know where this is going to land with who. So there's going to be listeners out there who are going to be walking the dogs or driving to or from work. What's interesting about podcasts is this. Listeners from this are all over the world. Like 2% of I'm in the northwest of England, and 2% of our listeners are in Japan.
That's amazing.
It's and that's the but so you don't really know where this is going to land with who, do you? So that's the nice thing. And I think what the whole point of this is like you very humbly said, this is your opinion, but you know, like you opened with, you've also got a lot of experience to give a validity to your opinion. And I think what hopefully with the podcast, we're trying to give a 360 view of the same question. We only ask the three questions to all guests. And the idea is that, a listener can get a really good rounded view. So I think that lens, no one's ever answered a question like that. And what made me kind of stop and pause was thinking, that's a really nice, refreshing way to look at it. So I was actually smiling, thinking, oh, that's a really interesting. I guess and I think where you went in there, and I'd love to explore around environment when we kind of move into as a leadership possession, because that's if that's important. I guess the bit, if you're comfortable, just kind of leaning into, you were saying, if you're an individual then that can't control all of the environment, from an individual perspective, in your experience with working with the athletic population, what can somebody take from that to kind of what within their control, what kind of things could they do to kind of control themselves to turn up at the best version of themselves?
So, like, here's a practical exercise that I think has some merit. If we go with this theory that production is person times environment, then the first exercise is what would make an optimal environment.
Mm.
If you think about, like, what's it called in planets, right? The Goldilocks theory, where it's like you need a planet that's not too cold and a planet that's not too warm, right? So if we're looking for optimal performance, it's like, okay, let's make a list. And then I think what would be, if I was to walk through a player or a coach or a front office member, and I'm like, let's create an optimal environment. Let's make a list. So first step is, let's just brainstorm it. And just to go on a side note for a sec, part of what I try to do, I'm a little bit all over the place. Let me collect my thoughts for a sec. I think the world of sports psychology, executive coaching, whatever this craft is that we're doing, has a little bit of Wild West to it, because anyone can be an advice giver, whether you're a bartender or a barber. Someone's got life advice, they've got life wisdom. And so I try to differentiate my services and my skill set a little bit. One is I try to really come from a place of science and continued growth and learning. The other is through experience, like you were talking about. But I also try to focus less on being an answer guy and more of being a contributory element to the environment, so that the person can explore both internally and externally what they feel like they need to either become unstuck and grow, or to be an additive growth element to their process. So bringing it back to the concept of, if we were to have a fun exercise, you go, okay, the formula is environment times person equals production. What's an optimal environment for me? So if you and I are working together, I go, okay, Andy, like, let's talk about it. What's an optimal environment for you? And then I would say, let's just brainstorm it. No edits, no criticisms, no judgment, just absolutely just blast everything you can on a piece of paper.
Mm.
Once we have that, let's call those kind of like your must-haves. Now let's go the opposite direction. What are all the things that absolutely must be removed from your environment? The toxic elements that could hinder your growth and development. And let's just call that like your must not have list. Then I would say, okay, now that we've got these two lists, can we shift these things? Like, what are your absolute essentials? Like, without this, we are not going to be successful. And what are your desirables? Like, you know, this is preferable, but I could live without it if it doesn't exist in this particular space. So, what would be an absolute essential? Um, well, let's try it with you. What would be an absolute essential for you, Andy, if we wanted to get the best version of you?
Oof, good question. As an environment I would thrive the most in.
Yep. And this is, we're talking about an absolute essential. Like, if it wasn't there, you would not be able to succeed without it.
Oh wow, it's a really good question, isn't it? Makes you think deep that straight away, doesn't it? Um, for me to perform at my best, I need like this space to think.
So, if we were to create an optimal environment for you,
Yeah.
one of the things that you're saying is like, I need a space to think. So is that like one of those egg chairs, those $10,000 egg chairs that kind of blast omega waves to stimulate thought? Is it a meditation center? What would that look like?
That could just be sitting on a field on my own with just time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you go, okay, well, what's absolutely essential? Is it,
Yeah.
a notepad and a pen?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you go, okay, now what would be things that would be preferable?
Yeah.
Because I think that's another element, like just to go back to one of your original questions of like, I'm kind of watching in the pro space. It's really hard to win without money.
Okay.
Like if it, and I interact with owners quite a bit. And one of the things that I kind of say is like, this is not the time to be fiscally responsible. I don't know very many teams that are successful that have low budgets. But here's the interesting thing, just because you have a lot of money, it doesn't guarantee
Mm.
that you're going to win. Like, it's not like the team with the most money or the biggest spend gives you that win. So it really becomes where you opt and choose to spend your money. So could we buy a $10,000 egg chair? We could, but we could also spend $5.95 on a pen and a notepad.
Yeah.
And if those two things are equal, now we can take the additional $9,995 and put it towards something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So going back to the exercise and the thought exercise, and again, that's kind of what I try to do with the people that I work with
Yeah.
directly is I try to create an environment. I try to ask meaningful questions that are a little bit more thought provoking that help them illuminate to a place of clarity where they go, oh, like this is my driver, or this is the kind of stuff that I need. So going back to your list, and I know it's not exhaustive, but right now we've got a place to think.
Mm.
What would be on your toxic list? What must you have? Sorry, what must not exist in your universe in order to get the best out of you?
Almost not exist.
Yeah. Second, this enters the system, your system will fail.
I think it's without that. I think it's with when there's an element of when you don't have the opportunity to express your opinion, or you don't have the opportunity to share, or even if it's not asked. I think if it's I think I don't work well in environments where people tell me what to do.
So going to that, let's assume for a second you're now a center midi,
Yeah.
and we have a coach in our system, our manager, is more of an accountability style where he's really about like, I'm going to set standards and a discipline. And your role as a player coming into my system is about rigidity.
Yeah.
If you follow my system, I don't want creative play. I don't want inspired play. I just want you to execute as we trained all week.
Yeah.
As talented as you are you saying that's an absolute deal breaker for you? Or could you find a way to navigate within that system?
I think I can find a way to navigate within that system 100%. I think where I would struggle in that system if someone said, like, you need to do this and then this and this and this. Whereas if he set some frameworks or boundaries to say these are four rules to work with, but in those rules, there's a trust and accountability that you can do things. I think I would work with well with that.
And so this is where I think the actual essence of this exercise really kicks in
Yeah.
and ignites is notice you took a must not item,
Yeah.
you actually pushed it to, I think I can still navigate it if we were to put some bumpers on it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you're going like, I could be in a demanding situation as long as they provide me some level of explanation so I understand the rules.
Yeah.
And I think what you're also implying, but you're not suggesting overtly, is not only do you have to understand the rules, but the rules have to kind of make sense to you.
Yes. Yes.
If the guy, if the coach says, "Hey, I want you to light your kit on fire," you'd be like, I need to understand
Yeah.
why that makes me run faster. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, once you turn the temperature up on your kit, I promise you, you will be running as fast as you've ever ran. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So going back to the exercise, it's about understanding an optimal environment to get the
Yeah.
highest production, and then really assessing, is this the right fit for me? And is this really the right fit for them? I
Yeah.
think something that yields success is when we let a good player go play for someone else because we know they're not going to be great for us.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's a hard one. Like talking with owners and front office and stuff,
I
is
can
they're like, yeah, but his production at
yeah.
Brighton Hove is XYZ
Yeah.
stats and his on ball percentage and all these other kinds of things. It's like, yes, all of that is true there. But when we bring them into our world,
Yeah.
are we going to see that get better?
Yeah.
Because if
No,
we're not, then we really got to let him stay where he is.
I like that. And it's some of the power of that. I mean, I was just reflecting then, even you put me through that very short exercise, which is now going to be thought provoking from a dog walk later, going, actually, what is on my lists? Because I think no, that has it's proper resonated me going, I'm really curious about what's on my list. So that's going to be my evening plan. And again, is that so? Let's say you're working with a player to see if they are right fit. Even by them, you just holding that space for them to ask those questions. I mean, my assumption is that's quite helpful because if no one's even given them the thought, let's say you are a talented player or a talent, or people listening to this, away from sport, if they're very talented, an accountant or whatever, but they're going to go into a different role, but they're going to be going into a different position, or like you said, change of clubs, or you're a big club and you're going to sign them for, in all elite sport now. They're not going for a few dollars or a few pounds, are they? We're talking tens of millions. You know, is some of the power actually giving that athlete that awareness for themselves so that they can see what works right for them? Do you think that, or do you think they naturally know that, or is that?
Well,
Go
I
on.
think an element of this that we didn't get to, and if I was with a player, I would hope that this would be entered into the conversation,
Yeah.
is control.
Okay.
So if I can, just so I'm a little bit more knowledgeable for a sec, if I can talk about like the NFL,
Yeah.
there's 32 teams in the NFL. By contrast, there's 500 Fortune 500 companies. That's why 500 is in its title. So if you're a world class accountant and you want to work for a Fortune 500 company, you have 500 environments to fit in. When you're an NFL player and you want to be in an NFL team, you have 32.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it becomes, how many of those 32 are actually eligible? And so the essence of the exercise is also about kind of understanding the limits of control. Yes, NFL players, yes, English Premier League players, like they can try to force trades or transitions, they can try to force transfers, they can try to navigate, but like there's also limits to the spaces and the places that they can go to. And then it becomes an interesting mechanism of choice. So once you have a clarity of what you think a great environment looks like, then the next quest is, how do you find a way to navigate to that place that has as many of those things on your list as possible. I think it's really hard to get everything on your list, on your
Mm.
wish list. And then it becomes, what things can we augment and alter, and what things can we accept? Um, and it's interesting because some things we can live without that we didn't think we could, and some things we can tolerate that we didn't think we could tolerate.
Yeah. And does that model work? So just thinking about what you were saying there and kind of where my brain's gone to is, so you've obviously got an athlete into a team. So is their individual haves and have nots, and what can they tolerate within an environment, and a team environment. But then obviously there's like the owner, their haves and have nots, and the environment that they're creating, which players will fit into. So how do you find, because there's a balance there, isn't there, to try and find, okay, so we need to create an environment where people want to join us and want to play and want to do this, but also there's the environment that an owner may want to have and create. So where do they, is that where the trade-off kind of sits?
Well, this is going to be, again, human behaviors and human interaction are complicated.
Hmm.
That's just a fundamental belief of me.
Yeah, definitely.
So even to try to approach a question like that is an attempt to simplify something really complicated. But let's
Okay.
just do it for the intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
Just know that as we attempt to simplify it, we might lose some of the fidelity or the sophistication that the
Yeah.
question really warrants. I find for some owners, they are grabbing a whole bunch of like Scrabble letters in a bag, right? And they're kind of shaking it up, and then they grab a handful and they throw them on the table and they go, okay, what words can we make out of this?
Okay.
So what you see is this kind of perpetual dance of roster formation and reconstruction, and then managerial and coaching styles, techniques, and mechanisms, right? Because there's tactics, there's techniques, and then there's style. And it's like tactic is, and technique is all about, like, how good's their footwork. Then you've got strategy, like, are we going to be a ball controlling, are we going to do more counterattack? I mean, you know, I'm watching the World Cup right now. I don't know if you saw the Netherlands versus Japan game that happened, but it was a brilliant match of two teams with very contrasting styles. And you could see them kind of trying to calibrate between the two styles, right? So, sorry. So, going back to it, the owner is grabbing the Scrabble words, throwing it and seeing what words they can make. And that's what I see. Like, I think right now the NFL, the average length of an NFL head coach is a little bit under 3 years. It's like 2 point something years.
Right.
Average length of an NFL player is 2.7 years. I think NBA average length of a head coach's tenure is 2 years.
Right.
So you're having this constant sort of
Mm.
like, again, I don't like these letters. So I'm going to just toss those
Okay.
letters and grab a whole new. And then it's almost like a level of luck, right? Where it's like some of these owners, they happen to spell a 50-point word. It's like, hey, that was a good one.
Yeah.
And, and so I think trying to figure out the quest of making it less lucky.
Yeah.
So how does that work? And I don't know if this Scrabble metaphor is landing. I'm just trying to think of an international. You've
That's
mentioned
good. Yeah. Yeah.
2%,
Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
and hopefully they play Scrabble there too. But albeit with different letters. And um, so what's interesting, right, is like when you lock certain variables in. So again, going back to the Scrabble exercise, you pull some tiles out of the bag and you go, ooh, like the letter T and the letter A. That can really work in a lot of spaces.
Mm.
And you go, okay, let's hold on to those. So again, if we're going to grab 7 tiles, and now we've got 2 that we really think can be foundational. Now we go, okay, now what letters complement T and A lot? H. H is kind of a unique letter, but man, it really goes well with T because you can now start to do things like, if you've got HAT, now you've got hat.
Mm.
But if you add an O, now all of a sudden you can go OATH. Now we've got oath.
Mm.
So it becomes this idea of like, oh, what kinds of things are foundational pieces? So sometimes I find, and this is why I think ownership matters so much in the pro space, owners that really know who they are and what they believe in, they
Yeah.
tend to hire people that align with their values and their conviction.
Okay.
And then those people end up hiring people. And then those people end up hiring people. And then those people end up hiring people. And
Mm.
before you know it, you have an organization that has a waterfall or a cascading effect of that ownership's value system. And that's where I think things get kind of cool.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. And I get, okay. So if there isn't an owner who has got that, then it comes a lot more complicated. And I'm sure that makes your life a bit more complicated.
Well, I think it becomes a really interesting puzzle to solve and to engage with
Yeah.
is to, have an interaction with an owner and say, hey, tell me your story. How
Okay.
did you go about buying this team? Why did you buy this team? What was it that you want to accomplish? Some owners, and I'm not trying to vilify owners, far from it. I'm trying to really applaud them. But some owners, will engage with the team like it's a hobby,
Okay.
almost like, hey, I've bought a yacht
Okay.
and I like to invite all my friends over to come hang out on the yacht and talk about us going on an adventure on a yacht. And they're like, so I bought this team because I thought it'd be really cool to hang out and engage with folks, and it'd be kind of a status symbol in my my library of valuable things. Others I see having a really neat relationship. There was an owner with an NFL team that I worked for, and one of the things I ask before I join a team is if I can spend a day with the owner, if it's possible. And I'm like, hey, tell me your story. And this owner was telling me about how he grew up, and every Saturday his parents would take him to a college football game. And that was a very familial experience for him, was feeling a part of something. He felt a part of his family. He watched his father engage. He got to celebrate and he got to mourn with his dad with every victory and failure. But he also ended up talking about like kind of like the community of the stadium, where he was like, he told a story about being 8 years old and high fiving a stranger, and his dad kind of saying that was okay. And he's like, where else would everybody be okay with me just high fiving? Like you go to a grocery store and a guy tries to high five you, it doesn't really
Yeah.
make a whole lot of sense. And so it was kind of neat because what he was saying was, I want to create an experience that recreates the experience I had when I was 8 years old.
Mm.
And that's the decision linchpin that I find a lot of his decisions when it comes to hiring a GM, when it comes to hiring a head coach, he's looking for people who can create an environment that the 8-year-old self can high five some
Ah,
random stranger about.
yeah. Okay.
So what's interesting, sorry if I'm rambling,
It's
please
good.
cut
It's
me
good. No, no, no.
off. What's interesting is this owner has built an amazing stadium. And not only does their stadium house the football team, it houses football,
Yeah.
American football and European football. It houses Formula One racing. It
Right.
houses tennis. I mean, he hasn't created just an arena. He's created essentially a sport complex.
Yeah.
Now, their team, the NFL team, has sort of waxed and waned in its level of success, but the experience, the fan experience, is enduring.
Mm. So that memory of being an 8 year old is every decision is being how do I almost share that with everybody else?
That's my theory, and
Yeah.
that's why he keeps kind of expand. So some would say, "Hey, you're all over the place. Why don't you just focus on one thing and let's create a really good NFL team?" And he's going, "Well, wait a minute. Like, if we're going to have a fan experience, we can have a fan experience across 5 different sports in the same
Mm.
arena." And that's what he's done.
Mm. I guess, and it sounds like when you were telling that story, that certainly I could see you almost enjoyed that environment. I felt like that he seems quite well connected. I got the I got the vibe that his Scrabble pieces spelt a few words, or he knew at least what he was going to do with the Scrabble pieces. I guess, where does your role sit with owners that maybe don't? How are you? Is there an opportunity to challenge that and kind of, if for the good of the team,
Um,
or is that a difficult
I
position?
don't think that's my role to
Okay,
challenge it.
yeah,
And I think to challenge something comes with a preconceived notion that you believe there is some element of right or wrong there.
okay,
And I think part of where I have a tendency to go in the nature that I try to do in the space that I try to sit in is I think about like the origin of psychology as philosophy, you know.
mm.
Human beings are kind of neat, right? Like we think about things. We think about thinking and then we think about our thoughts about our thinking, you know. So what I try to do is I just try to better understand
Yeah,
if this is what your value is and if this is what's going and I without judgment or without challenge, but I will say, you know, like what are the strengths of that thought? What are some inherent challenges that come with that thought? How you know, if you held on to that thought for 100 years, sorry, let me see if I can phrase this. If I were to ask you 100 years from now, would that thought still be relevant? Would it for you?
mm.
Is there anything that would cause you to want to alter or edit that thought? If that thought actually produced losing, would you still want to hold on to it even though it was counterproductive?
Yeah,
I just find like when people, and like the expression that we use sometimes here in the United States, and maybe it's relevant universally, is like, you know, would you die on that hill? Would you fall on that sword? So
yeah,
I know that I'm at core principles and core values when people say to me, like, I don't care if we lose the next 20 games as long as we're still holding true to this idea or this
okay,
concept.
yeah, yeah. And I guess that's what my intention behind the would you challenge. I think you articulated a lot better than I did.
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, but that's what I meant. It's like, because there's, if you can, in your experience, if you can see there's a misalignment between what the environment he's trying to create and actually what they've got, you know how to do that. But I think that kind of almost seek to understand, ask more questions, and kind of ask some deeper questions. Like you said.
Yeah, well, I remember there was this great quote from Henry Ford where he said, like, you know, if I asked what people wanted, they would have said faster horses,
Mm,
you know, not a car. And so I think sometimes when I'm trying to sit in the space, you know, I'll be like, hey, what do you want? And they'll say winning. They always, you know, like they always say that.
yeah,
And then it's like, well, but why do you want to win?
yeah.
What does winning do for you? And so again, like going back to this owner that we're talking about, is like he was trying to recreate a warm memory for others
Mm,
to experience. So his winning wasn't about like, you know, being able to pound his chest, or, you know, it wasn't about holding a trophy in front of millions of people. It was people in his arena, in his stadium, being able to high five one another. It's like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
Takes a while to get there though.
Takes a while to get to that moment, or
Yeah, to get to that kind of insider truth. Very rarely do people go, yeah, like I just want to build a legacy.
okay,
Though I do find legacy to be a common theme because most owners are of a generation where they're starting to reflect on their time on this planet. And it's
right,
sort of like, when I'm gone, how will people remember me, or how will I be remembered, kind of thing.
okay.
So I do sometimes see legacy as one of those concepts that comes up a lot.
How do you find the balance between, obviously, where does it sit between, like, your role moving from like an individual player all the way through to that? Because I guess there's quite a shift, isn't there? I guess in the difference of conversation. How do you find that?
Um, yeah, it's a really good question. I stumbled upon this by accident. I mean, what's interesting was, and you kind of started this interview with my resume, and it's a long resume, and I'm proud of a lot of the things that I've done and the people that I've gotten to work with. Still makes me sound old, which I'll take. I'd rather be old than dead. But where I think I was going with that is like, um, I stumbled upon this when I first was introduced to this field. It wasn't that much of a thing. Like it existed, but there wasn't a lot of people doing it. Now it's a lot more popular. It's really
Mm.
grown. I mean, most teams have somebody in their system. What I find to be unfortunate, so this is always kind of like a good and bad sort of thing, is like I love the fact that the industry has grown. I regret the fact that there is not a specific career path of education or training.
Okay.
If I wanted to be a dentist or if I wanted to be a cardiologist, there's a very clear path of what you study in college, what you study at medical school, and what boards you have to pass in order to be able to do that craft. But when it comes to the sports psych space, you can come from different departments of education.
Mm.
You know, you can come from the psychology department, you can come from the or business leadership department, you can come from Department of Education. Like there's a bunch. And then same, like when it comes to graduate school training, there's a wide variety, and then it becomes licensure and certifications and stuff. So I find what we've done as far as a profession is we've really confused the market. And we talked about this earlier, but anyone can be an advice giver, a
Yeah.
butcher, a bartender, a baker, a candlestick maker. Like, and what's nice about the human condition is people love to give their opinions. Like, hey, do you like my hairstyle? It's like, ask five people, they'll happily tell you what they think about your hair. And some people are happy to tell you what they think about your hair without you even asking.
That's where I'd gone to actually. I was going to say people just give advice without even permission. Yeah.
I mean, I know some
Yeah.
practitioners, and no disrespect to them, but I know some practitioners that not only will they give like a really sharp bit of advice, but then they'll be like, "You're welcome." And it's like, I wasn't asking for that guidance. And I'm not exactly sure I like what you said.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not really inclined to thank you for it as if you've done me some favor. Like it's
Yeah.
almost a really weird source of narcissism.
Yeah.
So what I stumbled onto, narcissism, let me talk about me. What I stumbled onto was like the first pro team I worked for. Part of what they hired me to do was to be a resource to the head coach, the GM, and the team president.
Okay.
And I said, if I report to any one of those individuals or anyone on the org chart that reports to one of those individuals, I'm not sure how much I can contribute to the other folks. So if I report to the team president, at what point does the GM wonder what kind of information gets flown to the team president?
Yeah. I agree. I understand. Yeah.
So I said to the first pro team, if we're going to do this, I think I should report to ownership. And when they asked why, and I gave them the explanation I just gave you, they said, that makes sense. Let's
Mm.
do that. So what I have found is everywhere I've been, I think I've been with 8 professional teams across 3 leagues. And then, like you mentioned, a couple in the NCAA space as well, 3 in the NCAA space. Um, where I sit on the org chart is either this like N of 1 with a dotted line to a bunch of things, or I report directly to ownership kind of element. And the advantage of that is, sorry, this is such a long-winded way to get to your answer to the question. The benefit of that is I can help anyone in the organization,
Mm.
from a player to the front office to the support staff to the head coach, to anyone that I'm in front of. Like one of the owners that I work for currently, I said, hey, I could use a little bit of job clarity. And he said, help whoever's in front of you. And I said, in what way? He goes, in whatever way they need it. whether it's a mental health kind of thing, emotional
Mm,
distress, if it's an optimization kind of thing, like, hey, how do I become the best version of myself? Or if it's a human interaction kind of thing, like culture, how do we lead people? What kind of message should we deliver to the group at team meetings? That kind of stuff. And
mm,
so I like that. The disadvantage of having this sort of like outside the org chart flow is I get left out of meetings and emails all the time. Because a lot of times, just for efficiency, they're like, hey, I'll just shoot director of basketball ops this group email, and I already have my emails identified as director of basketball ops. Well, I'm not in basketball ops, so that email doesn't come to me. So sometimes from a workflow, that's the disadvantage is, you know, when people who are trying to juggle the complexities of systems, and it's like, well, where does he sit on the airplane? Does
mm,
he sit with the front office? Does he sit with the coaches? Does he sit with the players? Does he even sit on the airplane? Do we throw
mm.
him in the wing? Do we throw him in the loo? Like, you know,
Yeah.
so those kinds of details sometimes become more complicated than they need to be.
But I think there's some real true insights there. I mean, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you are, and be people listen to this whose responsibility is to kind of to be the soundboard or you know, the person that's there to support people. But like you've said, there's always that, well, who are they going to tell? Whereas what I picked up from you is, well, you kind of, the way you've positioned yourself on the organization chart, you come across as neutral.
Try to,
Yeah.
right? What's also, but it's hard sometimes to
Oh,
be
yeah, I can imagine.
neutral,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's even for us as the providers. I always encourage us of early career professionals is just be aware of your own bias,
Yeah.
and whether you like someone or dislike someone. Like again, we're human beings
Yeah.
too, so
That's
just
it. Innit?
be
Yeah.
aware as you enter the space in what ways you alter the space.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I took from that is, I think that the element around advice, isn't it? It's very easy to give advice, isn't it? I always turn
and
around to, it's very easy to choose to ignore it as well, though. This is my often the thing of going, my famous line I used is, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to tell me about it, but if it's all right, I'm going to choose to ignore it.
that's cool. Yeah,
But for the reason being, it was unsolicited. It was just,
yeah,
you know what you should do, don't you?
yeah.
And then,
I mean, I- what I find to be beautiful, and I say this with like a smile, like it's beautiful garbage in a way, is like the level of conviction that I've heard some people give advice with the small amount of knowledge that they know.
yeah,
And like here would be a goofy example, not quite professional example, but a goofy one is earlier in my career, I remember I went home for a vacation, and my old mates from high school, we all decided to go have a drink at a bar. And like a lot of friends do, we got into a healthy discussion about a particular coach, right? And his decision making, who he should have started. And so I'm listening to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, Coach X should have started player Y. It's a no brainer. I don't know why he benched it, like the whole thing. And I was listening, listening, listening. And finally I said, hey, I work for that team, which was true. And they
yeah.
didn't know because I don't really walk around with like written on my forehead. I
The
work with
tracksuit
Coach
on,
X.
going for a beer.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't
Yeah,
really wear a lot of I
yeah,
don't wear a lot of gear
yeah,
recreationally. I wear gear when I'm in the
yeah,
building just to kind of like blend in.
yeah.
Um, because if you walk in, they think you might be an agent or something,
Okay.
or a suit. You walk in with a suit. It's like, who's that guy? But so I try to blend as much as I can. But anyways, so going back to the story, I go, I work with that team. And you would have thought that they would have said, so are we right? Like they just said, well, why don't you tell Coach X to play that guy? Like that's
Oh,
how convicted they
oh,
were in how he should have managed the game.
yeah,
That they actually got mad at me for not telling
yeah.
him to do exactly what they thought he should do.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah,
And I was
no, I love
like,
it. And And again, it's why we all love sport, isn't it? Because it's it's it doesn't matter where you are in the world, sport that everyone's got an opinion and they don't mind sharing it over a beer with their friends and stuff. Which
The best is like you get into it like a you get like in an Uber or a taxi cab or something, right? And they it's a also a very universal thing to talk about.
yeah,
It's like so again, just because we've got the draft coming up, and I'm working for a team that's got a lottery pick, and it's one of those things where everybody's like, so it'd be one thing if they said, "Who's your team gonna take?" Which of course, like I'm not telling you because like
yeah,
that information's sacred. But it's when they say, "Hey, you know who your team should take?" Like, okay.
yeah.
I mean, thank you for your opinion.
Yeah. I love
It's
that.
fun.
I love that. I'm conscious of time, so what we're going to do is we're going to start wrapping up. You are one of those individuals I probably could spend another hour talking to, but I appreciate you're a busy man, so I won't. I'm not going to take another hour of your time. I promise. Don't worry.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you for saying that.
So, just wrapping up. If we're thinking about the kind of conversations that we've had, and that the kind of listeners are, we get a good variety. We got a lot of people from elite sport. We've got in performance. We've got a lot of leaders, a lot of founder-based business owners. And we actually have quite a lot of athletes that do listen. So you can answer this question wherever it feels appropriate for you to go with it. But
Okay.
from the kind of conversation today and your experience around unlocking potential, what would three practical things that people could try today?
Three practical things to unlock your potential. Am I in the right environment? Kind of circling back on that subject that we went
Yeah,
and
nice.
addressed.
Yeah.
Number two, I hear a lot of times people talk about following your passion. I'm not so sure I would agree with that. I think the real secret to potential and unlocking it is competency.
Okay.
So and it's easier said than done. Like, hey, just be
Yeah.
competent.
Competent. Yeah.
But it's sort of like, well, what leads to that? So where I
Yeah.
think passion impacts competency is if you love something, you're more likely to engage with it for a
Yeah.
longer period of time, and then
Yeah.
ultimately you would get better. So time on task.
Yeah.
So I think of passion as the things that get me out of bed, like the things that I love. I also
Yeah.
think of purpose, which is a
Yeah.
little bit more selfless, like these are the things that I do for others.
Yeah.
And then I think about competency, which is sort of like, I'm right handed. Now, if the nature of the task is left handed, there's a competency issue there. Now, could I eventually get my left hand functional? Maybe, but there's a gap there. So I think if number one is, are you in the right environment? Number two is, are you competent? Do you have the right kinds of pieces to be successful in this domain?
Mhm.
And and I know that kind of circles back to, well, what is the right environment? But so I'd say like maybe number two is this level of competency folded with follow your passion, follow your purpose, and follow also what you're good at. Number three, um, don't drink expired milk. And I
Awesome.
think what I mean by that would also be like, I mean, I don't know, I was just trying to be funny, but I think what I would also mean is like knowing when to peel away from something
Yeah.
might be just as valuable as knowing what to go towards.
No, I like that. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing for the environment piece for me is either the environment you're in or the environment you're creating, depending on where you are in your career. Think about that. So I do like that.
Yeah.
What principle do you wish every leader understood?
I want to give credit where credit's due. There's this guy, John Levy, who just wrote a book called Team Intelligence. And in there, he said something that really resonated with me, where he said the one universal truth of all leaders and leadership is that people are willing to follow them, which I go, God, it's so brilliantly simple
Mm.
or so simply brilliant. But he goes one step further and he sort of says, like, the real question is why do people follow you? And he concludes, and this also resonated with me, that the reason people will follow you is because they believe that you will make their lives better in some way, shape, or form. So you don't have to be an intelligent leader. You don't have to be a competent leader. You don't have to be a spiritual leader. You don't have to be an emotionally intelligent leader or any of these other kinds of things. All you have to do is ensure that the person that's following you believes that their life will be better because they follow your direction. And the reason why I think that resonated so much with me is I've seen really talented individuals in leadership roles, like coaches, lose the locker room. And
Okay.
once they lost the locker room, it was
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, it's done.
And how you get people to believe that you're making their lives better, I think, is where the magic is. And
Yeah.
that's complicated too.
I was going to say that's where where we circle back to all humans are complex, and actually, it's a really complex question, isn't it? Yeah. No,
No doubt.
it's nice though. So just to kind of wrap it up, if people are interested, where can they find you and follow you?
Well, I
If you
guess
want to
the
be
question
found,
is,
obviously.
why would they follow me? I guess if they believe I'll make their lives better
Yeah,
somehow. But
nice.
you know, so for me personally, I do not have like a website or anything. I've never really marketed myself.
Yeah,
I've been very, very fortunate to have been sort of found by individuals that have hired me because a conversation like this resonates with them in some way, shape, or
yeah,
form. So I'm trying to think of like what's a forum. Like I don't really even check. Like I don't check LinkedIn very regularly or any
yeah,
of that kind of stuff. But I mean, I guess you could find me on LinkedIn. The one place that I can promise people can get to me is through the AIQ. And
yeah.
that is something I'm really proud of what we developed as a group. Jim, Adam, Jonathan, Matt. I mean, I could list Eli. Like there's a bunch of people that have really made the AIQ something special. Um, and if you go to the AIQ.team, that's our website, there's places where you can reach out and contact me through there, or you can also figure out what the AIQ is and how it might benefit whatever it is in the space that you're building. I can promise you this, when you talk about the person and the environment, knowing how they process the game, which is what AIQ does, it definitely helps you identify if it's a good fit.
No, definitely. And from spending some time with, with Adam on and looking at that and having some good conversations, I definitely think if you are in that space, then it would definitely do. And again, all the links will be in the show notes for people to just easily click on it. And is that the plan? Is that what's next? Or is there any other, is it developing that and moving that and growing that side of the business?
Oh, for me personally?
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of a curious explorer. Like
Okay.
I'm that guy. Like if you were to say, "Hey Scott, you want to come on over to England and spend a week?" I'd probably go do that. And I don't even know if I would ask a whole lot of additional questions. Like if you were like, "Hey Scott, come on over. Like we'll have some fun. We'll meet some people. It'll be a neat adventure." I'd be like, "All right, let's go." I've always done that throughout my life.
Okay.
Been a curious explorer. One thing I do with leaders is I try to identify like a personal mission statement. So again, like what's your North Star? And mine is I just want to do cool stuff with cool people.
Nice.
So whatever's next for me is generally based off that rubric. If it's a cool project, and if it's a cool project, and if it's with really engaging, interesting, fascinating people, I'm in.
I love that. Love that. What a great enough start to have. So
Thank you.
just before we close off, one
Yeah.
final challenge that you could set the audience, what would it be?
Final challenge.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think. That's a good question. What would I challenge your audience? With this amount of space, I almost feel like I have to say something really profound.
No.
All that empty silence and nothing coming to. I don't really know how we challenge individuals. I guess the thing is, I would say, well, here's something that's kind of on my mind. And I don't know if this is a challenge or not, but there's just something that gives me a half smile to this
Yeah,
that I think hopefully would be a good way to land. And this might take a minute. So if you can, let me dance for a sec, if that's
let's go.
okay.
Let's go.
When I was 15 years old, I went to the Soviet Union as an interesting experience. I was an ambassador of goodwill, and I went to the Soviet Union. And I remember at the age of 15 being very proud to be an American. And one of the benchmark moments was I was having a conversation with a Russian who said, the difference between America and Russia. He goes, you know what the difference between America and Russia is? And I said, no, what? He goes, if your grocery store runs out of strawberries, they say come back at 3 o'clock. If our grocery store runs out of strawberries, um, come back in June. And I always felt like, gosh, what an amazing country to have that kind of accessibility and everything.
Mm.
Now you flash forward 15, that was a long time ago, decades ago. Flash forward a few years ago, I took my family on a trip to South Africa. And like Americans, we went to the grocery store and we loaded up for the entire time we were there. We were there for a few weeks. So we loaded up. Like we went to the grocery store and and people were looking at us like, what are you doing? And and I remember like, we bought bacon and, deli meat, just stuff like that, bread. All of it went bad in 3 days.
Mm.
And the reason why is like, and I don't mean to be political here, but in America, like the food industry has changed in really significant ways. Like it's meant for shelf storage and things like that. So the taste is down. And so a couple years ago in South Africa, I went from at 15 being really proud to be an American to in South Africa being kind of like embarrassed and ashamed. And like it is interesting. Whenever I go into international space, I find myself apologizing a lot. Like and not to be political, but it's like, explain to me Donald Trump. And it's like, it's hard. And this idea of like make America great and having this sense of patriotism, like we're the best country in the world, when it's like, I don't know, because the food in South Africa was amazing and it was fresh and it was flavorful and it was nutritious and I just felt different when I ate it. And so
Yeah.
a few years ago, it was this full spectrum of like being proud to be an American to now being somewhat like embarrassed or apologetic. And this is challenging with the World Cup right now. All these folks from all over the world are coming to America. And it seems to me like they're having this really wonderful time embracing the things that are so bizarre about our country. So what's kind of neat about social media, like TikTok and all of that, is you're watching people. Like there's this guy, I think he's like Freddie from Germany, who's gone viral right now because he's talking about going to like, Bucky's, which is a gas station here, but it's
Ah,
not like any gas station you've ever seen. And people like again, going back to the Japan Netherlands game that was filmed in was at the Dallas Cowboy Stadium. The announcers are going, this is the most amazing stadium I've ever seen. Like the scoreboard is the largest TV screen I've ever, and so I'm finding a sense of joy in people kind of enjoying a wide variety of aspects of this international flavor. Like, why is there so much ice in your soft drinks? And what is an In-N-Out burger? And so I think, and this is why it's long-winded because it's so half-baked. But the idea of recognizing that human beings are complicated, human interaction is a multiplier of complexity, and rather than be xenophobic and just assuming that what else is not me is bad,
mm,
kind of thing,
mm.
that I'm watching people enjoy the diversity of this planet. So I think the thing that I might try to land on for your audience is to step out of your comfort zone, eat at a restaurant that you've never eaten at, engage in a conversation with someone you might not normally talk to, find the differences and see about comparing the flavors, not judging them, but comparing them.
Mm.
And then again, going back to like Freddie from Germany, I think one of the things that he discovered was ranch, which is
Okay.
like a it's a salad
Salad
dressing,
dressing. Yeah.
right? And he's going, who told me that? Like, I had no idea ranch was so amazing, you know? And it's like, I don't know, there's just something so beautiful about that. There's this guy, David Chang. He's a world class chef. And he wrote this brilliant article called The Unified Theory of Deliciousness. And what he said is like, there are certain flavors that are just universal. They're just called different things. So, like, if I were to say, let's talk about fermented cabbage, well, if you're German, you would think we're talking about sauerkraut. But if you're
Mm.
Korean, you would think we're talking about kimchi.
Yeah.
But there's still the same kind of essence of a soured, kind of crunchy sort of food bite.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that I would love to challenge, and what I think is super cool about this conversation, like again, you're in Northern England, which is a beautiful part of the world. I'm in Michigan, in the United States right now. And the fact that we get to have this conversation, and there are certain things that we align to, and certain
Mm.
things that I think we learn as outside of our space.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge to give to the audience, is to go be curious explorers and have a meal or have an engagement with something that is so outside your comfort zone that it expands your mind, and you're Freddie discovering ranch in Alabama.
What a phenomenal way to end.
I
Oh,
hope.
awesome. No, I think I love it. Absolutely love it. Dr. Scott Goldman, thank you ever so much. I've loved this conversation. I really, really do appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for creating an optimal environment. So hopefully we had a productive conversation. Thank you.
It was lovely. Thank you ever so much.